Marc, thank you so much for joining us on the Hurt Healing podcast. It's a real honour to have you all the way from New York City, and I'm really, really looking forward to this conversation.
I am too, thank you.
Would you start off by defining what emotion is and what emotions are and how they differ from feelings or reactions?
Sure. Well, I think, when we think about an emotion, it typically is an automatic response to some kind of stimulus. So, for example, this morning I was going to a meeting and I got into the Uber and it said I was going to be 40 minutes late for my meeting. That was like a stimulus, right? I'm like, shit, I am going to be late. And I was giving a talk to 500 middle school students that were waiting for me. And so in that moment, like there's a stimulus, which is I got information about being late. And all of a sudden I have thoughts, I have feelings, and I'm motivated to like try to figure this out. That's an emotion. It's when something in your environment shifts. A feeling is more of a private experience. So for example, like I feel like we're going to have a good conversation. That's a feeling. But then there's also moods, which are different from feelings and emotions, those are experiences that are kind of a little bit less intense and longer in duration. So for example, if I'm pissed or angry, pissed is not the right word here in Britain, but you know what I mean? Angry, annoyed, and I'm like ruminating about it, it will turn into like a bad mood.
Okay. It is very hard. There's a very sort of subtle nuance, isn't there?
There is.
It's very hard, I find, to be distinguished between an emotion and a feeling.
It is, although think of it as an emotion as this automatic response to some kind of stimulus, either in your head or in the environment. And it has like a language to it, like the emotion of anger or sadness or fear or surprise. Whereas feelings can be kind of less precise. Like I feel like going to the movies tonight. I don't feel like speaking to this person right now. It's more subjective.
So would you say that it's a linguistic error when we say I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling tired? Actually, those are conveying an emotion.
They are, but I think that's a waste of time.
Yeah.
I think that, for psychologists who are studying this stuff,
Yeah.
in terms of the science, it matters. For everyday usage,
Yeah.
I myself, feelings, emotions, it's fine.
I just wanted to convey that to listeners because I do think that it is sometimes confusing. And especially when you're sitting in a therapy session, they're like, no, but like, what's the emotion behind it? And you're like, well, I'm feeling the,
Yes.
And it is sometimes quite hard.
It is hard, but it's, emotions and feelings they're just life experiences. And so like, for example, if I feel alienated, like left out, alienation is not necessarily an emotion. It's a feeling, like I feel like I'm not part of the conversation or left out. And of course, behind the alienation might be sadness or anger or something else. But I do think I'm a scientist, so I like precision. And at the same time, I don't want to make these things so complicated that it becomes like, ugh.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that's where you're so skilled, is actually in making all of this digestible and sort of accessible for the lay individual such as myself. So what is the healthiest way to interpret emotions, and how can we know what those emotions are trying to tell us?
Well, the way I like to think about it is that there is no such thing as a bad emotion. Oftentimes we evaluate emotions. Some emotions are good emotions, like happy and excited and contentment. And the bad emotions are anger, anxiety, and fear, and despair, and loneliness. And I think that's a terrible way to think about feelings and emotions, because emotions are data, they're information. And so I always say that emotions matter for 5 really important reasons. Emotions drive our attention. So for example, hopefully we're, in a good place where we're paying attention to each other. Like if you were bored with me, you'd be like, oh my gosh, when is this over? Right? Emotions drive attention. Emotions drive decision making. So how we feel literally influences the way we evaluate things. Emotions drive our relationship quality. Emotions drive our mental health and physical health, and they drive our goal attainment and performance. And so to me, that's why I study emotions, and it's why I teach people the skills of emotional intelligence, because emotions can either be helpful or unhelpful, right? My stress and anxiety can overwhelm me and I cannot focus, or I can use my anxiety wisely and perform at my best.
And I think that's the problem, is sometimes we get so caught up in our heads and we don't learn how to process those emotions in a healthy way. And then suddenly you find yourself suffocating under this like deluge of what you don't really know. I mean, you kind of, is it an emotion? Is it a feeling? Is it something from the past? Is it, so how can we actually learn as individuals to process them in a healthy way?
Well, that's what Ruler is. And so Ruler is a framework that I've worked on that is built upon the theory of emotional intelligence, which says basically that we have to learn skills to deal with our emotions. The first is recognizing emotions. So that's self-awareness in terms of Marc, like what's going on in my body right now? What's my thought process like? So we have a tool for that called the mood meter, which is a 2x2, where it's pleasantness and energy. And so high pleasant, high energy emotions are the happy, excited ones. High pleasant but low energy are calm, content, tranquil, peaceful. Then the unpleasant, again, not bad, just unpleasant. The blue feelings are lower left. That would be feelings of down, sad, lonely. And then the red is the anxiety and anger family, which is the upper left. And that's for all the self-awareness pieces. So like right now you think about like, what's your pleasantness like? What's your energy like? What quadrant am I in? That's the R. Now I'm also looking at your facial expressions and your body language, right? And like you're smiling now and I'm thinking, is that a real smile? Is it a fake smile? That was a genuine one because you got the crow's feet.
Yeah, it's a real smile.
There you go. But that's what we're doing all the time. That's kind of just, we're born to do that, to detect emotions in ourself and other. The U is understanding. This is where most people are not so highly skilled. So understanding where the feeling comes from, like why am I feeling this way, or what am I actually feeling? For example, most people confuse emotions like anger and disappointment. Can I quiz you on that one?
I'd say that anger is more of an impulsive, like short-term reaction, more of a reactive emotion to something that's really irritated you, whereas disappointment, I'd say there's an expectation attached to something and the outcome isn't what you expected.
Exactly. So for the disappointment, you get the A+. Unmet expectation, right? Everything's legit, but things just didn't work out how I wanted. Where anger tends to have an injustice associated with it, like this perception of like, that wasn't cool, that was wrong. And that matters because, kids especially, I hate you, I don't want to go to school today, and mother, why are you so angry? Well, is it anger? Is it disappointment? Is it something else completely? Because we tend to judge people's emotions by their behavior. And behavior has no correlation with emotion. Because we're taught in the world we live in to mask our feelings constantly. I mean, how many times have you had a guest that you're like, ugh, and you're smiling, right?
Like this one, Marc.
Yeah,
No.
But you know what I'm
I
talking
do.
about.
Yeah, I do see.
So U is understanding. Even with the anxiety family, people confuse that. Is it anxiety? Is it stress? Is it fear? And then there's labeling. So then there's like, okay, what am I really feeling? If it's anger, is it peeved? Is it angry? Or is it enraged? So how granular and precise am I? So RUL of emotional intelligence is all about my experience, but also trying to understand your experience of emotion. Then the E and the R of Ruler are kind of the strategic elements of it. So E is expressing emotions, knowing how and when to express emotions with people, across context and culture. So for example, like the rules, for example, as you know, yesterday I was with the royal family. The rules for expressing emotions are a little different than I'm used to in New York City. And so that's a nuance of culture and how that kind of relates to the way we talk about feelings, the way we share feelings, etc. There are gender differences there sometimes. There are cultural, racial differences there. Not always for the better or for the worse. And then finally, the big R, which is my new book, is all about regulating emotions. And so what are the strategies that we have to both manage our own emotions, but also engage in what's called co-regulation, which is how do I help you when you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed or sad or lonely to manage your emotions more effectively?
So I'd love to touch on that because I think it's such an important theme. And I think, we hear the word codependency as well thrown around a lot. And I think it's really hard in this day and age sometimes to regulate our emotions. And sometimes it sort of swings the other way. People become too self-indulgent. And
Yeah.
there's an issue now of overdiagnosis. And every child I hear on the streets around here on their way home from school is throwing around words like trauma and sort of being given PTSD from what a teacher said that day, or having ADHD, all these terms. So where's it all going wrong now?
Oh, I mean, well, where's it all going wrong? I mean, a lot is going right. I'm an optimist.
Okay.
But I do think where, there are challenges is, I think people are used to talking about emotion in the extremes. I'm depressed. I used to work as a clinical psychologist in the hospital with people with like severe depression and dissociative identity disorder. And I was like, come with me. I'm going to show you what real depression looks like. You're frustrated, you're disappointed. And you don't have to do that with compassion. But I do think that people pathologize emotional experiences too much. It's biologically impossible for 80% of college students to be, have anxiety disorders. That's just not possible. And so I think that we talk ourselves into these things oftentimes. That's not helpful. And that's why I teach people, vocabulary, so that you are like, no, disappointment. That's what it is. Discouraged. It's not despair. It's not hopelessness. It's not depression. Same thing with the anger family or other emotions. The other thing I think that's interesting in today's world is that somehow or another, even the work that I do has been misperceived. Like I've been accused of people saying things like, you just want people to talk about their feelings all day long. And I'm like, I never said that. That's not helpful. It is not a good idea to endlessly talk about your feelings because that causes rumination, it causes perseveration. But it is important to be able to communicate your feelings when you need to communicate them and to learn strategies to regulate them. So I think it's an art and a science.
What would you say are the most effective strategies to help us regulate our emotions?
Well, I know a lot about that now because I just spent 3 years writing about that and studying it. I think the first step in emotion regulation, well, first I should just define it first. And so I have a new formula. Actually, before I finished my book, I had this idea, I need a formula. And so I wrote out this formula. Emotion regulation is a set of goals and strategies, because it is a goal-directed phenomenon. Like, do I want to prevent an unwanted emotion? So for example, I was not nervous because I liked having these kind of conversations, but when I rang your doorbell, I was thinking like, am I in the right place here? Like, what's going on here? But I rang your doorbell. If I were feeling anxiety about speaking with you, I could say, Marc, you get nervous during interviews. So how are you going to enter into this environment in a more calm state? That would be prevention focus. I would anticipate the anxiety and say, what's your strategy beforehand? A lot of people don't think about emotion regulation that way. They wait until they're triggered and then they're like freaking out and they can't regulate. That would be kind of where you need to reduce the emotion in the moment. Another interesting emotion regulation goal is initiating an emotion. And I tend to do this a lot, especially in what I call co-regulation, because I do a lot of public speaking. And sometimes like when I'm in different countries, like here, yesterday I was giving this speech and I realized like my New York City humor was like, I was like, oh, it's not working. And I made a note. I just like called it out. I'm like, that was supposed to be funny. And then finally people were like, ah. But I did that intentionally because I needed to break the ice and so I threw in a little joke. I threw in a little, piece there to initiate a sense of like, I'm not this like stuffed up professor type. Relax everybody. Like want to just be with you. there's maintenance of emotion. Have you ever had a good day?
Have I ever had a good day?
Yeah.
I mean, I always liken days to being like the weather. It can be very changeable. I think a fully good day, there are usually ups and downs involved in a day.
All right. But
Yeah, I've had
some better than worse days.
Yes, exactly.
And so, when you're feeling the way you want to feel, and then you get a phone call or you get an email and it like pulls you out of it, like I always call that, what's your bounce back or maintenance strategy? And then there's always kind of like boosting yourself or enhancing an emotion. So we have an acronym for that. It's PRIME. Prevent, reduce, initiate, maintain, or enhance. And then there's all the strategies. So those are the things that you're really asking about, which, by the way, just before I get to those, vary significantly as a function of what you're feeling. Like your strategy choice is really based on the feeling you're having. It's based on who you are as a person. So for example, a lot of people think of me as outgoing. I'm not. I really this trip I have a lot of meetings and like dinners, and I'm just sort of like, I really want to go to a hot yoga class by myself. I haven't found one yet, but that would be my like ideal evening instead of like socializing and, whatever else. And so my personality plays into my regulation strategy, and then the context. So for example, right now, if I were overwhelmed, I can't be like, I'm going for a run. You'd be like, wait a minute, we're in the middle of a recording. So like I may go for a run tonight or this morning, but the strategies that I have available to me vary as a function of the context. Does that all make sense?
Complete sense.
Yeah. And so I just think, I try not to make it complicated, but it is complex. Because we have to help our kids and ourselves understand that emotional regulation is a set of goals and strategies that vary by the emotion, by who we are as people. That's personality, culture, time of day, and the context. All right, so now you want the strategies?
Yeah, now I want the strategies. It is like an emotional digestive system that you're creating, and that's how I look at your work. I think it is extraordinary, and I think you're making it so easily accessible and in a very simplified, digestible way. So
I hope so.
Yeah, no,
some days I don't even know what the heck I do. I think that before I get into the strategies, it's like not the big hold off to the strategies. But is that, I didn't grow up knowing there were strategies.
Yeah, neither did I.
I just thought that here I was, this kid who was not typical in any way, and felt very lonely, scared, alienated, all those fancy words. And I had moments of just sort of like meltdowns, and I just thought, this is going to be my life. Like, I'm just going to crawl up on a ball and cry, or eat my feelings. I didn't know there were like evidence-based strategies to regulate my feelings. And I feel so blessed that I now have them, because I really do have I'm like so much healthier and happier because I have, go-to strategies to regulate. And so, it's interesting, when the pandemic hit, and I had written this book called Permission to Feel, which is my kind of baby. And I was running around the world. It's been translated now to 30 languages. And the pandemic hits, my university shuts down. I'm like out of my mind with I have a team of 40 people. I don't know how to lead this team now on Zoom. And it just so happens that my mother-in-law came to live with us unexpectedly. She came for a family event on March 7th of 2020. And then the 13th of March was when everything shut down, including airlines. She lives in Panama. And so she was supposed to go home on March 15th, March 20th. She didn't go home until September. So we had 7 months of Irene, who I love, living with us. Anyhow, I share that with you because I'm an introvert who is used to, I'm a workaholic who, likes to go to hot yoga every day and do my thing. And everything was taken away. I didn't go to work. I was trapped at home. I, had my mother-in-law staring at me every morning. And then one night she looked at me and she goes, are you really the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence? And I was like, not tonight, honey. Not tonight. Like, it's going down. It's not going to be pretty. And it was an ugly evening. And I just shared that because it was that night that I went to bed and I woke up the next morning. I'm like, Marc, like, you're supposed to be like the world's expert in this emotional intelligence thing and you suck at it. And that was when I decided I needed to do everything I could to learn about emotion regulation in a deeper, deeper way. So I committed to writing a book that morning. And then I surveyed thousands of people across the world. And I asked them, like, what did you learn about emotion regulation? What do you know about it? And what would you have hoped to have learned, in your life? And that's now what I'll tell you what they are.
Yeah, I'm longing to hear.
Okay. Step 1, mindset. You got to believe you can do it. You have to have, what's called more of a growth mindset. You got to, I actually can learn strategies. You're not born that way. I always joke Lady Gaga was wrong. You're not born that way. We were not born with an area of our brain that says healthy emotion regulation. It's 100% learned. 100%. Which means that we have to sit with it and say, okay, Marc, you can do this. You can get better at this. You can learn it. Step 1. Because we have weird beliefs about feelings, with attitudes about emotions. Do you have
Well, especially in England, right? It's repress, repress, repress. And I was just going to say, for a lot of English people who are listening to this episode, they've been masters of bearing every feeling and every emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And actually,
I have stories about England.
Yeah. And I mean, this is what I've struggled with my whole life, from someone like you who was a hypersensitive kid and felt so deeply and was like a piece of Velcro. Everything stuck to me. And yet you're surrounded by people who are just repressing. So of course you feel like a walking freak show.
Oh my gosh, do I have stories for you about England? And I love England, by the way. And I'm blessed to be working, with amazing people here. However, my very first trip here with my curriculum, I was brought here by an amazing school in Maidstone, who was an innovative leader. He's like, I want to bring emotional intelligence to England. It was my first school. I get there, it's like 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm doing my workshop on emotional intelligence. First thing is this one teacher stands up, she goes, it's not my job to talk about feelings. She just walks out. And I'm thinking to myself, like, welcome to England. And what was really funny about that story is that it was another teacher in the room who was a younger chap, who was this like big cricket player. And he raised his hand. He's like, can I share something? I'm like, sure. And he goes, Marc, I just want to let you know that I actually was a student here and now I'm a teacher here, but like, she was my teacher. Anyway, it was an interesting morning. But I've had the weirdest, I think things have changed. This is like 15, 20 years ago. But I've had even, I remember going to one school and this head mistress, as she was called, of the school, she looked at me and she goes, we're never going to do this program in our school. And I said, why? And she goes, because it'll turn all the boys into homosexuals. I was like,
oh my goodness, to say that out loud, it's quite something.
And this is an educator. So I was, but Marc Brackett has a growth mindset. I will get you on my bus. And I did. I just, played around with the science, figured it out. And so people do have conceptions of emotion, but it's because they never had an emotion education. They're stuck with what they don't know. And so if you can find ways in to teach people the value of emotions, great things can happen. All right, mindset.
Yeah.
Good?
Good. We're all good for mindset. Yeah.
Okay. Next one, you got to build your vocabulary. So you got to have the words. You just have to know what you're feeling, because you got to label it to regulate it. And the strategies for disappointment, as we spoke about earlier, versus anger are different. Usually anger is a relationship-driven emotion. So like if we got into an argument and I'm feeling angry about what you said to me, I can regulate it on my own, but at some point I'm going to have a conversation if I want to deal with our relationship. Whereas with disappointment, it's usually like I let myself down, or I just didn't study as hard as I could have in school or something. Labeling.
Yeah.
Good?
For labeling.
Okay. I call those the building blocks. It's like your attitude and having the knowledge of what you're feeling. Then the next area is that breathing and mindfulness bucket. You have to know how to still your mind, especially, we were talking before we were recording about, scrolling and podcasts and everybody's, digital this and Instagram this. And I mean, our brains are we have no ability to be present. And so how do you even find a strategy if you can't even sit still enough to look for it, right? So how do you still the mind? Take the breaths, do the mindfulness exercises, the meditation work. It's really important. And we know from the research that it's effective. But it's not sufficient. I always joke, I told you my mother-in-law's story, I used to breathe. Now I'm even clearer why you got to get out of my house.
Yeah, exactly. I know something.
It's like I have ultimate clarity about why I'm annoyed with you. So you can't just breathe. It's a necessary but insufficient strategy. Sometimes it's good enough, but oftentimes you need more.
And as you said earlier, sometimes our strategies aren't appropriate for the nature of the environment that you're in. So, for example, it wouldn't be appropriate right now for me to get up and go for a run.
Exactly.
And it's interesting you brought that up because exercise has been my absolute coping strategy for dealing with uncomfortable feelings. Great to a degree until you're doing 8-9 hours a day because you can't tolerate any of those feelings, right?
Exactly. Or your relationships. It's like I used to be a fitness instructor myself, and I'd see all these people on the treadmill, and it was like they were just treading their way to oblivion.
Yeah.
Just avoiding life.
It's numbing.
Yeah. So, by the way, all of these strategies are both helpful and can be unhelpful.
Yeah.
So the breathing also, you can breathe yourself into I used to belong to a meditation center, and I would just watch so many of these people in the meditation center avoiding reality. Like, dude, you got to go out and ask the girl on a date.
Yeah.
Not sit in a cushion all day. But truthfully, it can be avoidance, or it can be nirvana. So it's the breathing one. You reminded me of an example of so many schools now just rely on breathing exercises. That's the easy strategy. And so I went to this school a while back, and I was asking this kid, you get into a fight with your friend, what do? Take a deep breath. I'm like, okay. I don't see what, next. So then you need the cognitive strategies. Those are the hardest, but they're really helpful. Those are the ones that because I'm an academic and I'm cognitive just because I'm a thinker, I guess. It's a weird way to think about myself, but I guess I am as an academic. And I love the brain hacks, the phrases like, Marc, take the high road. My favorite go-to statement for my own difficult emotions is, Marc, this feeling is impermanent. And that works for me really well. Like when I'm completely overwhelmed or just freaking out about something, I just take a breath and I'm like, Marc, it's a rainy day, but there are sunny days tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it really is quite remarkable because when you're having a strong emotion, oftentimes it feels like it's a toothache that will never go away. And if you can remember that the law is that everything is impermanent, it's very freeing. And it's hard to have that mindset when you're in it, but if you have enough experience practicing it, I don't know, for me, it's the most beautiful thing because I automatically say, if I'm having a low self-esteem day for whatever reason, I'm like, Marc, you loved yourself. Yesterday you looked in the mirror, you felt great. So it's like you can't have changed that radically in one night.
I know. And I think for women and hormonal fluctuations, this is what I keep reminding myself of, different times of the month. I feel so different about myself. I'm having a real week of body hatred this week, and I know that the week before my period, it always sets in.
Yeah.
I'm like, 2 weeks ago, I actually felt quite confident and quite good in myself. And like you said, I looked in the mirror, I was like, actually, things aren't so bad. This isn't, you sort of, you've changed a lot in the last sort of 20 years, but it's okay. We're on a journey together. Yeah. And this is what's meant to happen. And like you, I have a phrase that I repeat to myself, which is, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
And
Great.
it's kind of reminding myself that it's a shit day, it might be a crap week, but actually next week might be a lot better. And it's just really holding on to those pockets of joy that you can get in a day. And as we said earlier, like practicing gratitude for those little moments you
Totally.
get.
Well, and if you review your life, if you go backwards and you think, okay, like, I mean, yesterday I was presenting for the Royal Foundation of the Prince and Princess of Wales. I was at the top of my game, right? I'm like with Princess Kate and other experts in the field. And I was like, I've made it. Then I woke up this morning thinking like, I have no purpose in life. So, then I'm here now. I feel I have purpose again. But like, I'm also a little bit neurotic. This is just who I am. But, it's like, Mark, and that's why I walked here. It was an hour walk from where I was last. But I knew that I needed that space. And it was the best thing I did. I had an hour-long walk. I just got to like look at the beautiful architecture in England and just breathe and kind of like reset. And I came here and I feel great. And I'll leave here and feel like shit again.
Great, thanks, Marc. I think I feel so good.
But
it is the inner self-talk is extraordinarily
It is.
powerful. And like you said, I think in the moment, that's what I find tends to be the most helpful thing. It's actually being able to have that voice of reason, engaging that wise mind rather than dipping into the overly emotional or the overly rational mind.
Yeah.
And actually just saying, no, I'm walking the middle path. At the moment, I'm sat here feeling very self-conscious because you were very, very punctual and I didn't have time to get changed. So I thought, oh my God, Marc's going to arrive. I'm thinking Marc's arrived. He thinks you're a complete rookie. You're sat here in your sweatpants and your sort of gym gear virtually. And you just have to park that and be like, well, hopefully he'll see past that and he'll see that this is hopefully an animated, good conversation, and he won't think of me as a complete lowlife and someone who didn't dress up to have we all have that inner self-talk that goes on all the time in the background.
I mean, the outfit could have been better.
I know, Marc, I know, it could have been, it really could have been, and I apologize.
Actually, I just learned I'm so naive to branding, but I was just in Las Vegas and I passed by that store and I was like, oh, that's a cool brand actually. So
yeah, okay, so I get some brownie points. I'm glad. Okay,
all right, so we've got the building blocks of mindsets and labeling. We've gone to the breathing and the mindfulness. Then we just spoke about the cognitive strategies, and obviously, like in my book is like 6 amazingly well-researched strategies that people can learn about. It's a lot to go into in a conversation, but a lot of it is just reframing and not toxic positive talk, not like everything's going to be great. Like that's not realistic. But Marc, you can get through this. You're going to be great. The second, now we're moving on to relationships. So there's a phrase in psychology which is never worry alone. And I love that phrase because I think so many of us fear that we're going to be seen as weak if we ask for support. Now, this is a big area of my research now. I have this massive study I've been doing on the people with whom we feel safe and comfortable to talk about our emotions. And the research shows they have 3 qualities. Do you want to guess what they are?
Let me have a think about this. 3 qualities, just generic qualities.
Yeah, attributes.
They're good listeners. They're empathetic, they can relate, and they're emotionally intelligent.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. That's that's kind of the straightforward one. But the 2 that you said, good listeners, empathetic. But the third one is interesting. It's non-judgmental.
Yeah, non-judgmental. Yeah.
And what I find in my research, only 1/3 of people across the world think they have somebody like that. That's like heartbreaking to me, that people are so alone in life that they feel like they've been judged from the moment they came out of the womb, to be honest. You're too fat, you're too skinny, you're too tall, you're too short, you're too dark, you're too light, you're too gay, you're too straight, you're too whatever. And I find that just like, this is a big mission of mine. Like my next project, I call it the Uncle Marvin effect because that was my
The first person who made you feel listened to, right?
Yeah. And it's like, how do I create a world of Uncle Marvins or Aunt Lydia's or whoever? But it's going to take work because I think we just live in such a weirdly judgmental world. And people just, nobody wants to be fixed. Nobody wants to be told what to do with their feelings. People just want good presence. And they want just perspective. So that's the relationship piece. The next one is something that you talked about a bit, which is all the biology of regulation. So it's the good sleep, it's the nutrition, it's the physical activity. Those three things are critical for healthy regulation. People don't think about it. Like even I, years ago, I would think of sleep and nutrition and physical activity as part of my health. But I wouldn't link it directly to my regulatory ability. But they all dramatically impact healthy emotion regulation. And then the final one, I mean, then there's all the little stuff like, do you journal? Do you listen to music? Do you take walks in nature? You know, here in London, I love looking at the apartments and the molding. You know, whatever it is that gives you that kind of moment of you know, freedom or enjoyment, whatever it is, art, music, etc. But the final one is the one I'm most interested in now, is kind of defining for yourself what your best self is. I had this idea, this came from, so during the pandemic, I had gained a little bit of weight. I was not happy with myself. I was eating a lot of takeout. My mother-in-law was driving me nuts. And about 6 months into it, I'm like, I was a martial arts instructor for 30 years. You know, I was very active. And I was not happy with where I was going with my body. I was in a fortunate position. I decided to treat myself to a personal trainer just to get started. And this guy was great. Found him on Instagram, virtual trainer. He's still a good friend. And we had these long conversations. It was like pandemic time, so like you're just talking about everything. Like everything was so weird. And he said something to me that was new and fresh. Because I liked exercise, but I never I'm not a deadlift kind of guy. You know, I'm like 56, so I'm doing deadlifts, like really? Come on. You know, I tried CrossFit. Do you have that here?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I went like 3 times and I'm like, this is definitely not for me. Like, it's just not for me. Anyhow, I decided to do these, you know, weightlifting, but in a more kind of 4 days a week, like, you know, the whole thing. And honestly, as I was writing my book, I was doing this exercise and I would catch myself like, what am I doing this for? I'm 56. Who cares about your body? I mean, all the negative stuff came in. And I would talk to the trainer about it. And it was like this weird thing. I'm like I'm writing a book on emotion regulation. I'm like a self-saboteur while I'm working out. Like the whole thing was just, And we talked about the phases of kind of like exercise. And the first phase was like, you just got to do it. Don't even, you know, get into it. And if you commit long enough, like maybe you'll start seeing some results, which I did see. But the third piece, which is what interested me the most, which was he said to me, when you start identifying as a person who works out, you'll know you won't have to think about it anymore.
Becomes habit.
Yeah. And now, I mean, I cannot go without working out. And as I was writing my book, I realized, well, what if we applied that to emotional intelligence? What if we created a world where people like started to identify as highly skilled in emotional intelligence? Like, what would be different? I mean, think about it. And so I've started, like, I started studying this and applying it to my life. And it became really interesting. So, like, if you were to trigger me right now, like, say, I don't like this thing or whatever else, I would take a deep breath and I'd be like, Marc, you're the guru of emotional intelligence. Nothing she can say can interfere with your life success. And you're going to be the creative genius and take what she says and, like, figure out a way to, like, make her understand, blah, 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 blah. And it's become, like, an amazing habit for me. I just feel like you don't have the right or the power to take over my emotional life because I am the wizard of emotional intelligence. And so that's part of my hope, is to cultivate the future wizards of emotional intelligence.
Well, it's, you know, aligned with what Mel Robbins has written about let them.
Yeah.
You let everyone else deal with their shit, and actually you've just got to do you. And in a way, if
Yes, although I don't love just let them.
Yeah, because as you're saying, if we all become wizards, and hopefully in turn, actually, we become a very serene, emotionally aware society whereby we don't judge, we listen, we empathize with other people's struggles, and it sort of has a knock-on effect, doesn't it, for everyone?
Well, and also I think that part of our job, at least my job, is to have an other orientation. Is that, I still, like, if you just let them, I think it doesn't feel right to me, like to pay it forward. And so I feel it's important to like, for example, so I talk about my Uncle Marvin, who was my hero. And I really, in the research that I've done about him, like applying my relationship with him to the world, where I've studied the people who have these Uncle Marvins or not, it's about non-judgment, listening, and empathy. And so I was giving this speech. This is like many years ago. And this one guy in the audience, he looked at me and he goes, "Are you talking about Marvin Moore, the 6th grade teacher from Monticello, New York?" I'm like, "I am." He's like, "Mark, you're not going to believe this, but your uncle was my teacher 45 years ago." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" And so I said, "Let me finish my speech, but let's talk afterwards." I'm sharing this with you because he said to me, "It's clear what a profound influence your uncle had on your whole life." I'm like, "My career is because of my uncle." And he said, "Well, for whom are you an Uncle Marvin?" And I'm like, I like to do the research. And I needed to hear that. Like, am I paying it forward? And so I get the let them piece, and I'm not opposed to it, but I'm also an advocate for, like, we need to be the first to be helping other people to cultivate their skills too.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think, you've got a very tough job in England because there is this sort of stigma attached to feeling our emotions and not being perceived as being weak if you're overly emotional and you can articulate how you're feeling. What is the fine line between being self-indulgent and being emotionally intelligent?
Yeah, I love that. Actually, it's a really interesting point because the self-indulgent is not emotionally intelligent. It's the opposite. The goal of emotional intelligence is not to be wallowing in your feelings all day. It's to be strategic about recognizing them and regulating them. And I think people forget that emotional intelligence is not just about the feelings, it's about strategically using those feelings to achieve your goals. And so if you're indulging in the emotion, then you're probably going to have a difficult time, in relationships, making good decisions, et cetera.
So it's not wallowing, and I think a lot of people tend to think that
It's the opposite.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, and that's almost the perception that we have to shift.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's particularly amongst older generations. My parents, for example, they don't really have an emotional vocabulary.
No.
And when suddenly they're presented with someone who is articulating how they feel, it's, oh, for God's sake, stop being so ridiculous.
Yeah, keep calm and carry on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is the mantra. Just toughen up, stiff upper lip, just get on with it.
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't lead necessarily to a life of joy. If you're in an unhealthy relationship and you can't, I think about it in terms of romantic relationships, in terms of how many people have been with partners for decades where they don't feel seen or heard and they have never been able to communicate that. That to me is a life of misery. If we don't have the courage to say, hey, I don't feel comfortable when you say these things, we're out for dinner with people. Or I'll give you a personal example. Why not? In England. I have a lot of friends. I like the last 5 years of my life, I've just had a lot of great things happen. Just feel, very blessed. And, my work has been exposed. I publish books. I'm running around the world. And I feel lonely in that, where I don't feel always like I don't want to brag because I'm not interested in bragging, but I'd like to share my success. Like, it was pretty freaking cool to be at an event yesterday, with the Princess of Wales. And I want to be able to share that with people. and not feel like I'm bragging, and also I'm always afraid that people are going to get envious. And, and so I'm sharing that with you because I was talking about this with a good friend of mine recently. And in my past, I felt very reluctant. And I would just like not share my joy. And I'm like, that sucks. Like, why do I have to hold my joy inside and not feel, a little bit of pride or a little bit of happiness or joy? And how do I find the people in my life that I can share these things with where it's going to be, enjoyable to have the conversation with them? And I found those people now. And it's amazing to me because I don't feel like I'm bragging, and they like, tell me more. And I'm like, I want to hear your successes too. But I almost find that in life sometimes we're inhibited in expressing the joys.
It's so true. And it can either become a case of schadenfreude, where there's sort of like someone who feels like waiting for you to trip up.
Yeah, exactly.
And people sort of love, again, to focus on where someone's had a disaster, or because it makes them feel better about their own sort of lack of fulfillment.
Exactly.
Or it becomes a bit of a bragging competition. You
Exactly.
feel like you say you've done one, and someone, oh well, I actually,
I know.
then and then it's this, suddenly you're entering into this match, and you're like, hang on, what is this dynamic? And as you said, it's being able to be surrounded by people who provide that non-judgmental space, and who actually can, slightly wallow in your success for a bit with you, but not indulge it.
Exactly. And listen, but not, go on and on and on. Like there's a point where it is unhelpful for that person to like think about. I had this years ago. I had somebody who didn't like me, and like they were like gossiping about me, which I was like, how could you do that? I'm like the nicest guy I know. But anyway, they did it, and I called every freaking person I knew. I'm like, can you believe this is happening? I mean, I can't take. I mean, this is ridiculous. Can you believe this is happening? I can't take it. I mean, like this is ridiculous. And then, like after 2 hours of calling everybody I knew and telling them the same exact story, no one gave me any advice. Nobody gave me any support. Nobody said anything other than they agreed with me to make me feel good. And I was then sitting home alone thinking like, I feel worse. Instead of someone saying, which one of my friends did, she said, how much power does this person actually have over your life right now, Marc? She didn't give advice. What she did was she asked me to reflect, which is the goal of the feelings mentor, not to tell, but to just figure out a way in to perspective take. And I said, actually, I've been seeing that person in years. And they said, so I'm just curious, what made you, like, why are you giving them so much power over your life? I'm like, I have no idea. This is ridiculous. And then it was like a way of letting it go. It came back again, but then I reminded myself. So, we need these people in our lives to, like, people need social support. Whether it's for grieving, whether it's for, dealing with a difficult moment, or the other side of things is that, like, life should have joy, and we should be able to share those joyful moments, and people should be able to be comfortable with your joy too.
I completely agree, and we all have such a loud inner critic that actually sometimes you do just need to externalize what that inner critic is saying, and you need a voice of reason to mirror back to you. Actually, like, that's just not rational, and that's actually not what's going on.
Right.
Because we can all ruminate till the cows come home, can't we? And that's one thing that's interesting when you're talking about your exercise. I find when I'm exercising, that's when my rumination is at its worst. Even though
Really?
Sometimes even though you think you might be really distracted. If I'm with someone else working out, it's fine. But if I'm doing like steady state cardio, oh my God, I ruminate and ruminate and ruminate.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's finding those strategies where you're able to just push it to background noise and be like, you know what, I'm actually just going to listen to this podcast and I'm going to be in flow.
Well, I find I've gone through phases of my life about physical activity. Right now, I like hot power yoga because it's fast and hot and I can't think. And that just gets me away from my thoughts. And I love that, like, when it happens.
Yeah.
Because I'm a ruminator too.
Yeah, and you do need that escapism sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think it's learning, like, okay, stop. I'm not indulging you. I'm not entering into this dialogue. and I'm just going to kind of try and focus. And then that is the art of being present, right? It's just bringing your attention back. And you might have to do it. I mean, some days it's just like, oh my God, what is going on? But it's just, right, again and again, you just keep practicing and you keep practicing. And that's where that inner self-talk, I think, can be so vital in
Or just allowing it to pass, like notice it. Like
Yeah.
when I get anxious, sometimes I'm like, oh, hi.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it kind of just dissipates.
Yeah. And that's, yeah, I agree. That can be helpful. I want to just get your thoughts on the difference between jealousy and envy.
Sure.
Because I think that's something that loads of us get confused, and myself included. And which of those can be a constructive emotion and which is a destructive emotion?
So jealousy tends to be about relationships. So I get jealous. So for example, if my partner is like paying attention to someone else and I'm like, oh, what's going on there? I get jealous of that relationship. I fear the loss of someone I love or care for. Happens a lot with parents and their two kids. Like, oh, you're paying more attention to this one than that one. Envy is really just wanting what someone else has. And that can lead to the positive side of admiration or the negative side of resentment. And jealousy is eye-opening. Envy is eye-opening. Again, they're not bad emotions.
Okay.
They're just emotions to be aware of.
That's interesting, because I once heard, I'm sure, that envy was destructive and detrimental, and jealousy could actually be channeled as a constructive emotion.
No, I don't think so. I don't like to see either one of them, as all emotions have data. And so just be aware, And actually, I have a lot of envy in life, but I use it to grow. I'm like, oh, that guy's presentation was freaking amazing. I'm going to pick up some of those tips.
Yeah, I totally agree, actually, I think. And I think also your work, I think what people have to be reminded about is actually emotional intelligence doesn't just affect personal relationships and interfamilial relationships. It's actually, affects your life on a huge scale. It affects work. It affects, all sorts.
Everything.
And if we learn emotional intelligence in the workspace especially, it fosters for a much more serene and productive and
better teamwork, better creativity, more productivity, everything.
So as we move into the darker months, I think so many people are struggling with loneliness, low mood, that feeling of just like, oh God, the next 4 months we're just going to have to hunker down, and the sense of meaningless that can set in, particularly if you live alone. So what advice would you give to listeners who are trying to protect their own emotional health for the forthcoming months?
I think be prevention focused. Think ahead. So knowing that, like, I get lonely or sad or depressed in these times of, like, plan ahead. Like, can I go away for a couple of days or not? Who are the people I want to interact with? What are the dinners that I can plan? What are the activities I can do? Just be forward looking and anticipate and fill it with things that will bring you joy.
As you said earlier, it is like developing a cope ahead plan.
Correct.
Marc, what a fascinating conversation.
Thank you.
And thank you for all the unbelievable work you're doing. And I'm excited for the many more books I'm sure you've got in you. And I feel very honoured to have had you on today. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.